Hello there ladies and gentlemen, I'm Paul TX141 Walsh, welcoming you to an all new pair of Ace in the Day gameplays for the arcade mode of War Thunder. In today's episode, a special episode, we're going to be reviewing the G.55 sottoserie 0, an Italian fighter aircraft coming to tier 3 and a battle rating of 4.3. Now you may be wondering what makes this review so special and why am I personally introducing it? Well, this is my 150th review on the channel for the Skies of War Thunder arcade. It's been 5 years in the making, dating all the way back to October 2013 when I initially reviewed the Spitfire Mark 5B. And it's been a pleasure to bring all these reviews to date, and I intend to keep on bringing the reviews on a weekly basis where possible for the foreseeable future. I'd just like to extend my personal gratitude to all of you who have been supporting this channel, whether recently or a member of old. You've really made this worth it all the way, and I absolutely love bringing these reviews to you guys and girls. Simply because, at the end of the day, if I know I can teach someone something about an aircraft historically, or just give them a little bit of assistance when flying in the Skies of War Thunder arcade, it makes all the difference to me, and I absolutely love doing this. But without further ado, let's get into the historical overview of the G.55 sottoserie 0, where I'm going to be taking a look at the inception of the G.55 all the way through to this particular variant of it. With that, let's begin. The G.55's origins can be traced back to Fiat's G50 design, a highly manoeuvrable radial engine fighter designed by Giuseppe Gabriella, which had two major drawbacks. The first was a lack of engine power, as it was powered by the same Fiat A74 RC38 870 horsepower engine as used in Fiat's CR42 biplane fighter design. And secondly, a lack of firepower, as the plane was only armed with two 12.7mm Breda-SAFAT machine guns. In 1941, the Regia Aeronautica, the Italian Royal Air Force, presented Gabriella with an opportunity to fix the first issue, as the Regia Aeronautica had decided to start building on licence the German Daimler-Benz DB605A1 inline V12 engine under the Italian designation of the Fiat RA1050. Moreover, the fighter manufacturers Fiat, Aeronautica Marchi and Reggiane were all invited to put forward fighter designs using the new engine under the Caccia della Serie 5 or the Series 5 fighter tender programme. Gabriella went to task, redesigning the G50 to accommodate the Fiat RA1050 RC58 Typhoon 1475 horsepower engine. Whilst doing so, he resolved the firepower problem by designing the plane to be equipped with the following: a single 20mm Mauser MG151 cannon firing through the propeller hub, two 12.7mm Breda-SAFAT machine guns mounted in the upper engine cowling, and two 12.7mm Breda-SAFAT machine guns as mounted in the lower engine cowling. The design was designated the G.55 Centauro, or the Centaur in English. 3 prototypes were constructed, the first undergoing its inaugural flight on the 30th of April 1942. It should be noted that the first 2 prototypes were unarmed, whilst the third was armed. The first prototype in particular was soon put into trials against the Marchi C205V and the Reggiane RE2005. In the end, the G.55 won the competition due to its all-round performance at low, medium and high altitudes. By contrast, the C205V performed best at low to medium altitudes, but struggled above 8,000 metres altitude, or 26,247 feet, whereas the RE2005 was the fastest at high altitude and the best dedicated fighter, but suffered from airborne balancing issues and was the most time-consuming of the 3 to produce en masse, not ideal for the current stage of the war. Both the G.55 and the C205V were selected for mass production as a result of the trials, entering production in the latter half of 1942. The G.55's production life started off with 16 pre-production aircraft designated as G.55 sottoserie or sub-series 0, featuring the same engine and armament as the original design, and this is the plane you're seeing on screen today. These aircraft entered operational service for the purposes of evaluation on the 21st of March 1943, where it was quickly identified that the 4 machine gun layout was difficult to service and rearm, particularly in the case of the lower cowling machine guns. This was to be resolved in the main production series, i.e. the G.55 Series 1, which immediately followed the sottoserie 0 on the production lines, seeing the lower cowling machine guns removed and an additional 20mm MG151 cannon mounted in each wing. We'll continue our history of the G.55 when we come round to our review of the G.55 Series 1, but for now, with our historical overview concluded, let us take a look at how the G.55 sottoserie 0 handles in the skies of War Thunder arcade. Our first gameplay for today takes place in the airfield domination map Sicily. For this we'll be using the following setup. Stealth belts across the board, the reasoning being that in general we want to surprise our foes with our incoming fire, not having any tracer components to give away our incoming shells. whether it be in a head-to-head or alternatively in taming the foe. We want to hit them hard, we want to hit them fast and take them by surprise. Focusing on the individual armament, we can see that in the case of the 12.7mm machine guns, in my experience, the stealth belts are the most powerful out of those on offer, due to the 50-50 split between armour-piercing incendiary rounds, which have the ability to puncture and ignite fuel tanks, and immediate action incendiary rounds, which have the ability to act as mini high explosive shells effectively, being able to do light fuselage damage across the board. In the case of our 20mm cannon, I've actually found the air target belts to be the most powerful out of those on offer, due to the larger concentration of high explosive incendiary mine and Geschoss shells, which will absolutely rip apart any given foe in the skies. With a 60% concentration of these shells in the stealth belts, this is not too much of an issue, and you still have ample firepower to bear down on foes with. Our gun convergence is set to 500 metres due to the fact that all of our armament is based in the nose and therefore not convergence reliant, and as for our fuel load, we're taking the standard 30-minute fuel load to ensure we can make it to the end of the game unscathed on fuel capacity. We begin our analysis then by discussing the climb rate of the G.55 sottoserie 0, and what we find is at its battle rating, the climb rate of this aircraft is comparable to the very best, including the likes of the C205 Series 3, review available using the link in the top right corner of your screen as displayed now for comparison. But there is one undermining point to the climb rate which means it cannot have the best climb rate at its battle rating, and that is with regards to its sustainability, particularly above 4,000 metres altitude, at which point you'll notice a slight drop off in climb rate sustainability compared to your competitors, including the likes of lower battle rating planes such as the Messerschmitt 19 F4. This means whereas your foes will still be able to gain say 2,000 metres altitude in a single climb at 25 degrees at given starting speed, you will, by comparison, only be able to gain 1,500 metres altitude, and in turn this becomes more and more noticeable as you go to higher and higher altitude regions of the sky. But this does not detract from the power of the climb rate of this plane as given by nature to the aircraft thanks to its licence-built Daimler-Benz 605 A1 engine, and we can see that in action here, cutting over the top of a Messerschmitt 19 G2 drop. And note a little hidden feature about the manoeuvrability of the plane here, in that its rudder, below 250 km an hour, becomes hypersensitive, and it means you can really flex the rudder of this aircraft around, giving you the ability to come down hard on foes by the means of a hammerhead to rip them out of the sky. We rinse and repeat here with a split S against the P400, making the most of our firepower to quickly dispose of them. Now with the whole climb rate issue, this actually combines in with another weakness of this aircraft compared to the best at its battle rating, and that is straight line acceleration. In general, what you'll find is, from the stall speed of 135 km an hour, which is rather nice for this plane at the battle rating, your acceleration is moderate on engine power alone to 425 km an hour, comparable to the likes of a Spitfire F Mark 9. What this means is, a good number of planes will be able to chase you down in a straight line on engine power, these planes including the P63 A10 King Cobra and the C205 Series 3 once again, and this also carries through to the likes of the P38 Lightnings. For more emergency power, you can kick this threshold up to 500 km an hour, but again the acceleration rate is moderate compared to what you could have in other aircraft. And this is echoed through to dive speed acceleration, where with your maximum dive speed of 949 km an hour, getting to that speed takes a very long period of time, because your dive speed acceleration is average at best, and again in the region of the Spitfire F Mark 9 or the equivalent of Yak 9U, but what you also have to consider is, once you go above 800 km an hour, your dive speed acceleration begins to drop off significantly, meaning that you take a longer period of time to get towards your maximum dive speed. Now in getting there, what you'll find is you're quite a fast plane in the dive once you get up to speed, but it takes such a long time that faster divers, again such as the P38 Lightnings, alternatively the P47s that you're going to see in the long haul, particularly if you're at a high battle rating game and seeing the likes of the P47M, will be able to outrun you in the dive and really put the fear into your six. Conversely, what it also means is a good number of planes at your battle rating, when they start to chase you in a dive, you'll be able to maintain the distance from them, but if you're chasing them, you'll struggle to gain the distance on them. And therefore it can be a little bit frustrating if you do not anticipate and try to time your engagements accordingly to catch foes when they're a weaker speed state compared to your own plane. And here is an example on screen of us chasing down a Messerschmitt 19 F4 drop, noting how long it takes us in a moderate dive here to chase after this aircraft, and we're fortunate they clock onto our presence and decide to take evasive manoeuvres in a direct horizontal line effectively, rather than trying to split us and turn it into a proper turn fight. If they did, then we'd have to put the manoeuvrability of this plane to the test, and we'll talk more about that in the second gameplay. Then picking up our ace in the day there, we now carry our momentum forward into this PBJ-1, and again note how long it takes us to close the distance to the target. And in a plane such as the P38J Lightning, alternatively the Typhoon Mark 1B later, battle rating of 4.7, we would have closed this distance a little bit faster, as those planes have the superior dive rate acceleration. Now it's also worth noting here how we exhausted our 20mm cannon because we jammed it. We had to make up the deficit for our machine guns, and the armour piercing sentry rounds, I should say, went to work there in igniting the left hand fuel tank of the PPJ, eyeing the wings, and that was enough for us to pick up the kill. This goes to highlight that whilst the machine guns lack the overall individual shot damage output, you can use the machine guns to make up the gap through sustained fire. And as for ammunition in general, you have ample ammunition to go around, where 250 cannon rounds for your single cannon mean you've got a lot of ammunition to dispense on target, and you've also got a total of 1,200 machine gun rounds that split evenly across all 4 machine guns, meaning that reloads are not going to come too soon, and if you're accurate and rather brief with your bursts, you'll be able to go entire games without reloading potentially. And this makes the plane a very enjoyable fighter. And I need to emphasise fighter here because one may be inclined to think that this would lean more towards, say, an interceptor. But instead what you'll find is, as seen over this first game, there are a number of roles you can occupy in this plane, because it's not the greatest at a given role, but it has that versatility. We've been able to get to altitude to suppress the enemy planes that are trying to climb up to meet us, and on top of that, if there were bombers in this game that are trying to level bomb, but it would really be, say, a ground strike or a front lines game mode instead of an airfield domination game mode, we could escort off any bombers or cut through the enemy bombers as we did against our Heinkel 111 towards the start of the game. So you're already seeing here the overall versatility of the plane come to life. And in the boom and zoom, as we start to move into manoeuvrability, it's worth noting that as you go to higher and higher speeds, you will start to experience some rather significant lock-up thresholds. In the case of your roll rate, you'll find between 650 and 850 km an hour, you'll lose 50% of your roll rate. And that compromises what is already a good roll rate in terms of you being able to roll the plane about on its axis. It makes it a little bit difficult to follow planes at lower speeds as they change direction underneath you. As for your rudder, we've already seen that it can be very powerful at lower speeds, but in general it's good. It enables you to turn rather nicely in a flat rudder turn and really combines well with turns where you've rolled the plane 90 degrees and pulled up on the elevator, alternatively in a hammerhead. And what you'll find is between 600 and 700 km an hour, your rudder only loses 25% of its capability. Now this is important because it means you can still remain precise in terms of your shot placement in a high speed dive. As for the elevator, this is the weakest control surface domain by far. What you'll find is your elevator as standard is average at best. It's a little bit heavy on the initial uptake, and as you go to higher speeds, between the 700 to 800 km an hour, you experience a 25% lock-up threshold, and this can punish you in a very high speed dive when you're boom and zooming a target because you close the distance to the foe too fast, and as you try to pull up on the elevator, you lose 25% of your responsiveness, and you can smash into the wreck that you've just caused in front of you for your 5-hour output. And I've had that happen a number of times to myself. But outside of that, if you can anticipate the heaviness of the elevator, you'll be able to get it to work, and it has a decent elevator loop circle. Now in diving down this Typhoon, unfortunately we're not going to get the opportunity to take them out of the game as the game's going to conclude, so let's get ready to take a look at our first set of post-game stats. With our 7 kills, we're able to pick up 33,216 silver lions and 3,114 research points. In this first gameplay alone then, we've demonstrated the versatility of the G.55 sottoserie 0 when it's given the ability to operate up on high in a clear sky situation. Given the ability to attack enemy bombers at will, thanks to the decent combination of firepower based around the nose, shredding enemy bombers rather rapidly, but in turn it can also act as a defender for any bombers, being on hand to escort them, taking out the rising threats from the enemy team, and act as an overall altitude suppressor against the enemy aircraft that try to climb, keeping the enemy team down to medium to low altitude. On top of that, we've also seen this plane can perform boom and zoom tactics in a decent regard, albeit we haven't talked too much about the energy retention, and we may as well come on to that now. In the fact that in the vertical, you've got rather strong energy retention, being able to dive from a starting altitude of say 4,000 meters in a maximum 90 degree angle dive, dropping 2,250 meters and then going into a return climb at a 30 degree climb angle, and what you'll find is on engine power alone, you can return to the same starting altitude with approximately the same starting speed, so in this example say 300 kilometers an hour. That'll be the strength of the energy retention in the vertical, giving you that boom and zoom capability. whereas in the horizontal you have decent energy retention for extended dogfights, as we're going to see in the second gameplay, and in a straight line you'll find that your straight line energy retention is not too great, only being able to start retaining your speed around the 600km/h mark, meaning that planes in a straight line coming out of a dive behind you will be able to catch up to you in general. Again, the likes of the P-38 Lightnings coming to mind. But now we move into our second gameplay of today, which focuses more on the manoeuvrability and turn fighting aspects of the G.55 sottoserie 0, and when it's pushed to the limit, how this plane can really fight back. For our final gameplay of today, we're on the ground strike map Green Ridge, using the same setup as before. As we go for our opening climb, one thing we haven't touched upon yet is the maximum altitude limit for this aircraft, which can be split into two categories. Firstly, in terms of control surfaces, where at 6,500 metres, you'll find that the controls of this plane start to become heavier, particularly with regards to the elevator at first. The elevator become heavier to the point where you'll need to start your elevator manoeuvres at a speed of 450km/h rather than the minimum of the ideal speed range, as we'll talk about shortly, of 400km/h to get the most out of the elevator. As your engine performance, at 7,000 metres altitude, you'll notice a drop off in straight line acceleration, and when you get to 7,500 metres, that's where the plane's climb rate starts to teeter off somewhat. But with the average engagement in a battle rating 4.3 game not occurring above 6,000 metres in my experience, it means that these altitude limits are not going to be triggered too frequently, unless really you're chasing after a new bomber who's made it all the way up to extreme altitude, alternatively that lonely fighter that's coming after you, alternatively you're going after them and you're both fighting up extremely high. As we go for altitude at this point, what we can see is that whilst the skies at first are not too occupied by enemy planes, we will get one Spitfire Mark IIA off to our right hand side who's just sauntering along with a bit of altitude, and there's also the threat of a P-47D Thunderbolt which has risen to the same altitude as us and we'll need to deal with them. Now starting with the Spitfire, here's where we go into an interception role for a brief period of time, and what you'll see is we're going to apply the principle of not having any trace within our rounds in order to make up for the fact we missed with our opening burst. Now it could be said that this Spitfire pilot is just completely not paying attention, but we can't take any chances, and that's where the lack of tracer will work to our advantage, because note here the only thing that's going to tell them they're taking incoming fire are the rounds that actually strike their fuselage and the rounds whizzing past them in terms of the noise, not the tracer actually physically whizzing past them, giving us more time on target. But now we have to come around against the P-47D Thunderbolt, and we decide not to go for the head-to-head. Now this is on the grounds of durability, which I'll go into after this dogfight. But first let's start off by noting that the turn circle of the G.55 sottoserie 0 is going to outperform the turn circle of the P-47 Thunderbolt. And we're going to bring all of our manoeuvrability to bear here to snap route out of the way of the incoming fire, cutting across the firing line of the Thunderbolt at a sharp angle to make them unable to actually hit our plane. And now as we force the P-47 to go into the loop, because otherwise they would have overshot us with their speed, it means we can follow them into the further dogfight. And what we notice at first the P-47 starts to dive away and we're not able to follow them because of their dive speed acceleration. But as they split test underneath us and we start to follow them, it was in reaction to our friendly German Thunderbolt who was coming towards them from the southern side. We're able to achieve a critical hit on their tail section, taking out their central gear leg, and we decide to break off through fear of attacking our ally through our burst. So instead we'll let our ally finish off the P-47 and we'll pick up an assist. But in that dogfight we saw the turn circle of this plane work to our advantage, tighten the P-47s, and in general average, comparable to the likes of the Okolpov Yak-9U and the P-63 C5 King Cobra. And with the application of landing flaps in particular, you can tighten this turn circle somewhat to the base turn circle of a Spitfire F Mark 9, albeit if they decide to use their landing flaps, then they'll turn tighter than you. And you can only do so for a limited period of time, because landing flaps in particular will bleed a lot of kinetic energy out of your plane, or in normal English your speed. We switch back into the interceptor role there against the Ki-49 Mark II, and as we do so and break away at this point, let's come on to some other aspects of this aircraft, particularly the durability. Now the durability of this plane is a contrasting picture. On the positive side you have a rather strong central fuselage which shields the engine very well in particular, and the engine is going to be the last thing on this plane in my experience to be damaged when this plane is hit. Conversely, the wingtips of this plane are susceptible to being ripped apart very quickly, whether through 20mm cannon fire or even from a light sprinkling of 12.7mm machine gun fire. And the cockpit as well seems to be exposed to machine gun fire, or gravitates having your pilot sniped by machine gun fire rather than cannon fire, which is rather apprehensive of going into a head-to-head versus the P-47 Thunderbolt, or their ability to bring 8 50 caliber machine guns to bear on our plane. And in general, when I've gone into a head-to-head against Thunderbolts, I've lost simply because I've had my pilot sniped so quickly. Therefore, going into head-to-head, you can apply the durability of this plane to an extent, making sure to try and avoid getting hit anywhere but the central fuselage, and when going after enemy bombers this also works to your advantage, but keep in mind the limitations in that you cannot take too many hits, particularly when they start to head towards the cockpit or the wing tips, which is why if you get bounced in this plane and your opponent hits the wing, you'll find the wing normally comes flying off. So avoid getting bounced wherever possible, because you'll just take maximum damage and your ability to stand a dogfight will quickly disappear. Now here we're in a situation where we try to go for a boom and zoom on a number of targets, trying to pick a target out of the bunch but a little bit too high. As we go into our dive here and build up our speed, we have to keep in mind our lock-up thresholds, particularly with the P-47 who's reacting to our presence and coming up into a head-to-head. And again here we don't want to take any hits in the head-to-head, so we go for a quick head-on, decide not to fire but evade at the last moment, realising that the heaviness of our elevator would cause us to go flying into the burst of the P-47 if we didn't react soon enough. Our pilot blacks out for a little bit at this point due to G tolerance lacking, as I've got a rather relatively inexperienced pilot, and the P-47 dives away to live to fight another day. But in return, we use our vertical energy retention to our advantage in breaking up to stay above the enemy team. Albeit now we've got an enemy Spitfire Mark 2B who's come out of spawn and is bearing down towards us, and this means we're going to go into a turn fight with them and see how capable this plane is in the turn fight. Now for ideal speed ranges, you'll note that I'm trying to keep my speed above 400 km an hour before going into the turn fight. This is because between 400 and 550 km an hour, this plane will be at its maximum performance on its control surfaces, and you'll get the most out of it. I'm putting a little bit of distance away from the centre of the map to make sure this remains a 1 versus 1 for as long as possible, so we can get the most out of the dogfight and really put the G.55 to the test. In split testing at this point, we're going to go for the initial head-to-head, using the head-to-head as an opener rather than a means of ending the engagement, not scoring any hits there, snap rolling out the way of the incoming fire, and now we go to down. You'll note very quickly, I realise that the Spitfire Mark 2B pilot is probably using their landing flaps to come around, so I engage my own landing flaps and try to reverse the directionality of the fight into a set of scissors, taking a small amount of scratching fire from their machine guns before forcing the Spitfire to overshoot through a set of rolling scissors. At which point the Spitfire now has the disadvantage in that they've got too much speed to bleed off, and in turn what it means is I can start to follow them, switching to combat flaps at this point and scoring a hit on their right hand wingtip, which is enough to take them out of this dogfight in terms of overall manoeuvrability. It's now a case of just delivering the finishing blow. But the Spitfire at this point gets the head start in breaking away, and this is where the moderate dive speed acceleration, or the average dive speed acceleration really, comes into play, as we're not able to outrun the Spitfire at first until they start making manoeuvres and also bleeding a lot of energy due to lack of aerodynamics enforced by the wing damage. And in return we eventually get close enough as they start to turn to pick up the kill in what was a rather tight dogfight. And that goes to show in the G.55 sottoserie 0 you can take the fight to the likes of the J2M2, the Spitfire F Mark 9s and other dogfighters at the tier and the battle rating that you'd not normally go and face in planes such as say a Fokker 190A4. As we go for our reload, and the reason I say a Fokker 190A4 is because of the comparison at the same battle rating, where that plane prides itself more towards firepower and brute force rather than the refinement of the firepower of this plane and more of its dogfighting capabilities over the control surface domains and turn circle by comparison. Not to say the Fokker 190A4 is not a capable dogfighter under the right circumstances. Now in breaking away, reacting to the J2M2 there, we were to pull them into our friendly territory because we're so close to our friendly spawn. We're now going to switch back into the boom and zoom roll for a little bit to come down on our foes. And I'm talking about ideal speed range and maximum altitude range. What about ideal altitude range? My general recommendation would be fly this plane anywhere between 3,000 and 6,000 meters altitude. You do not receive a penalty, interestingly enough, for flying below 3,000 meters altitude, but above 3,000 meters altitude you have to consider that you give yourself ample space to dive down on targets via boom and zoom, or alternatively just break away from an engagement, as we turn over the top of the J2M2 here, thinking they are trying to climb in spiral after us. And by operating from a base level of 3,000 meters upwards, it gives you ample versatility in the tactics you can employ. But in an airfield domination game where the dogfights are typically lower down in the skies, you may want to drop this limit to 2,000 meters altitude by comparison. And that gives you the time to build up your speed in the dive, or of your limited dive speed acceleration, as mentioned time and time again. Now in picked up our ace in the day, we're just heading towards our airfield at this point, getting some distance from the central battlefield, or where the battlefield's taking itself before time goes on. But that P-47 mops up our pillboxes, the game comes to its end, and it's time for us to take a look at a second set of post-game stats. With our 5 kills and single assist, we're able to pick up 11,813 silver lions and 1,878 research points. To defeat the G.55 sottoserie 0 in a given matchup then, I cannot recommend a particular approach as such, simply because it's going to be very situational, in terms of what plane you're flying and what your energy state is in terms of speed and position relative to G.55. So instead, what I'd recommend you try to do where possible is exploit a key weakness of this aircraft that we haven't talked about as of yet, and that is its abysmal stall recovery. When this plane hits its stall speed of 135 km an hour, it has a propensity to prop hang, in terms of keeping the nose pointing upwards despite the plane stalling out, and in return the G.55 pilot will need to force the nose of this plane down as hard as possible in order to get it to level out and start building up speed, and it will only start to manoeuvre properly once it hits an excess of 225 km an hour, giving you ample time to come around and dispel the target. This means that planes with wider turn circles, such as the P-51 D5 Mustang and the Focke-Wulf 190 A4, will be able to use spiral climbing to their advantage in forcing the G.55 to stall out in their wake. Alternatively, planes with superior climb rates from the outset, such as the C.205 Series 3, or alternatively the Spitfire LF Mark 9 and the Focke-Wulf 190 D9 at the higher battle ratings, can force the G.55 to stall out behind them and then come down hard via a hammerhead. Or if you've got the superior manoeuvrability and turn circle from the outset in the planes such as the Yakovlev Yak 3, the Spitfire F Mark 9 or the A673 Mod 22 Co, you just need to keep the turn fight going for long enough and use the opportunity of initiating a spiral climb to force the G.55 pilot to start stalling out, and you can come around on target to deliver the finishing blow. But by avoiding this weakness being exploited in the case of our own G.55 sottoserie 0, hopefully we've demonstrated today that this is a very powerful fighter for its battle rating, and it's not powerful in the sense of its ability to fulfill one or two roles, but its ability to extend a flexible nature across multiple roles and deal with those roles in an effective manner, whether it be low to medium altitude dogfighting or going up to the highest of altitudes to intercept enemy bombers. The G.55 sottoserie 0 is going to be a threat to the enemy team regardless of where it is placed on the battlefield, and that is why in my personal experience it's becoming fast one of my favourite planes in War Thunder today, due to its balanced overall nature on the control surfaces and its performance, which whilst it's lacking in some regards such as acceleration, you can learn to deal with over time. And when I think about Fiat's involvement in War Thunder, I can definitely say now, Forza Fiat Piloti, or in English, Fiat Force Pilots. And so I've been TX141, and if you have enjoyed this video, why not leave a like, comment or subscribe for future War Thunder videos on my channel. And once again I'd like to extend my gratitude to you all for your support thus far, and upwards and onwards to Review 151 as next weekend. But until then, as always ladies and gentlemen, take care and good luck in the skies.